Okay, so you're probably here because you want to get a better handle on deal structuring, right? And specifically, Magnus Kjøller's cash or equity model.
Yeah, that seems to be a hot topic. And Keeler's got the background serial entrepreneur, investor involved in, what, over 70 companies? He's definitely seen these deals from the inside.
Exactly. So we're going to dive into that specific chapter today, really pull apart his cash or equity concept from his deal structuring work.
Our goal is pretty simple, really. Give you a clear, insightful rundown of this model, kind of a fast track to understanding this fundamental piece.
Right. And at its heart, cash for equity is, well, it's about as direct as it gets, isn't it?
It really is. Someone puts up cash, a specific amount.
And in return,
They get a slice of the company. Ownership, usually shares.
like buying a piece of the pie, basically.
Hmm?
Cash out, equity in.
Couldn't put it simpler. It's a core mechanism for a company to get capital and for an investor to, get skin in the game. If you look at Kierler's book, The Table of Contents,
Mm.
it lists cash for equity right there under the models section.
Mm-hmm. That placement tells you something. It's foundational. A building block for, well, a lot of the more complex stuff that comes later.
Let's maybe use a quick example just to make it crystal clear.
Sure.
Say an investor puts in $100,000.
Okay.
And for that, they get maybe 10% of the company's shares.
Yep. Cash in, 10% equity out. Straightforward transaction.
And for anyone listening, whether you're thinking about investing yourself or just trying to decode business news, understanding this is, well, it's essential.
Absolutely. It's the baseline. So many other deal structures you hear about are really just variations on this theme, or they combine this idea with other elements. It all comes back to that exchange capital for ownership.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Kjøller himself, he adds a bit of a cautionary note, doesn't he?
He does. He mentions he generally tries to steer clear of being just a minority shareholder in these simple cash for equity deals.
Right. Which immediately makes you pause and think, okay, why? What's the catch?
It's a really good question to ask. And he does hint at why. Later in his work, he talks about tools, safeguards, ways to mitigate the risks you face as a smaller fish in the pond.
Things like, what was it, put options?
Put options, yeah.
Yeah.
Key man insurance clauses, preferred shares that have special rights built in, special voting arrangements, even getting priority on dividends.
So the basic idea is simple, but the reality, especially if you're not the one calling all the shots, it can get complex fast.
Exactly. And that's why understanding the nuances is key.
And it helps to remember, like you said, this is just one model. Kjøller lays out others in that section too,
Right. You've got things like milestone payment deals.
where the money comes in stages based on performance.
Precisely. Or sweat equity,
Hmm.
getting shares for your work, not just cash.
Mm-hmm.
And debt for equity swaps, where maybe a loan gets converted into ownership. It's a whole toolkit, really, for different situations.
But cash for equity remains that direct line. And Kjøller makes a point about valuations, specifically pre- and post-money valuations, right?
Yeah, he points out that in a direct sale of shares from one existing shareholder to a new investor, sometimes called a private placement, those pre- and post-money calculations aren't really the main focus.
Okay, hang on. Why is that? Why do they become less critical in that specific scenario?
Think about it like this. It's more like a direct asset sale between two people, if you're selling your shares to me.
Okay.
The main negotiation is about the price we agree on for those specific shares. It's less about calculating the total implied value of the entire company before and after my investment, and more about the value of that block of shares changing hands.
Ah, okay. Like selling a specific painting versus valuing the entire art gallery.
That's a good way to put it. It's a much more focused negotiation on the asset itself.
Got it. Now, Kjøller also mentions share classes. Common versus preferred. What's the key takeaway there for a cash for equity deal?
The main thing is realizing that not all shares are created equal. They can come with different rights. Well, preferred shares, for example, might have clauses built in. Anti-dilution protection is a big one.
Meaning if the company issues more shares later, the preferred holders don't see their ownership percentage shrink as much or at all.
Exactly. Or they might have mechanisms to maintain their percentage.
Yeah.
So even in what looks like a simple cash for equity swap, the type of share you get matters a lot.
So definitely not always as simple as just swapping cash for some shares. The details matter.
They absolutely do. Which leads us nicely into what Kjøller calls the fundamentals in his book, because these deals don't happen in a vacuum.
Right. There's
Okay.
always paperwork and process involved. First up, he mentions the term sheet.
Yeah, the term sheet, often the very first document that gets drafted.
What's its main job in a cash for equity deal?
Think of it as the initial sketch, the blueprint.
Mm.
Kjøller really emphasizes getting one down early, helps everyone get on the same page about the key commercial terms,
Yeah.
what's the price, how much equity, things like that.
It's generally non-binding, mostly.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
It sets the direction for the lawyers to draft the heavy-duty binding agreements later.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is important, Kjøller points out, some parts of the term sheet are often made legally binding right away.
Okay, like what? What should people look out for?
Usually things like confidentiality, keeping the deal discussions private,
Makes sense.
exclusivity, or a no-shop clause. That means the seller agrees not to talk to other potential buyers for a set period.
Right, gives the buyer some breathing room.
Exactly. Also, specifying the governing law, which jurisdictions' rules apply, and sometimes agreements on how certain expenses for the deal process are handled. Those bits often have teeth from the start.
Got it. So the term sheet sets the stage. What's the next fundamental step Kjøller emphasizes before you hand over the cash?
Due diligence.
Yep.
No question.
The homework phase.
That's it. Kjøller compares it to thoroughly inspecting a house before you buy it. You need to kick the tires, look under the hood.
So check in the company's books, contracts, legal stuff.
All of it. Financials, key customer agreements, intellectual property, potential lawsuits, their strategy. Basically trying to uncover any hidden problems or confirm the business is what they say it is before you invest.
Crucial step. Okay, term sheet, due diligence. What's next in the fundamental lineup?
The shareholder agreement, the SHA.
Right, the SHA. This sounds important.
It is. It's the legally binding contract between all the shareholders, including the new one coming in via the cash for equity deal.
And what does it cover?
It lays out the rules of the road for the shareholders, their rights, their responsibilities, how the company will be governed day to day, how decisions are made, what happens if someone wants to sell their shares, all that critical stuff.
And Kjøller uses that story about Johnny to show why the SHA is so vital, right? The dilution issue.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful example. Johnny's SHA didn't have preemption rights. Meaning, when the company needed more money and issued new shares, he didn't have the automatic right to buy more shares himself to keep his ownership percentage the same.
So his slice of the pie got smaller.
Exactly. Diluted. And even though the company eventually did well and sold, his final payout was way less than he thought it would be, all because that protection wasn't in the SHA. Really highlights why you need to sweat the details in that agreement.
Definitely a lesson there. Okay, there's one more fundamental document Kjøller mentions, the Articles of Association. How does that fit in?
Think of the articles as the company's internal constitution, its rule book.
Okay.
It defines the company's purpose, how much share capital it's authorized to issue, the procedures for big decisions like appointing directors, changing the rules, or even winding the company up. It's the foundational operating manual.
So how is that different from the shareholder agreement? They sound a bit similar.
That's a common question. The key difference, Kjøller points out, is that the articles are usually a public document filed with the authorities. They set the basic governance structure for the company itself.
And the SHA.
The SHA is typically a private agreement between the shareholders. It goes into more detail about their specific rights and obligations towards each other. Sometimes the SHA can add to or even modify how certain things in the articles work between the shareholders, as long as it doesn't conflict with the law or the articles themselves on core company matters.
Okay, I think I get the distinction now. Public rulebook versus private contract between owners.
That's a good way to think about it.
So let's circle back to Kjøller's advice about cash for equity. He said negotiate special provisions if you're a minority investor. Based on these fundamentals, what might those provisions look like?
Well, drawing from what we just discussed, you definitely want to look closely at preemption rights in the SHA to protect against dilution, like Johnny's situation.
Right.
You might negotiate for specific voting rights on key decisions. Maybe needed your consent, even if you only own a small percentage. That gives you more say. And you can try to build in some of those other elements Kjøller mentions later, like getting preferred shares instead of common ones, which might come with things like liquidation preferences or priority dividends. It's all about adding layers of protection or enhancing your potential return.
Makes sense. Trying to balance the scales a bit when you're not the majority owner. Kjøller also quickly mentions seller warranties. What's their role?
Seller warranties are basically promises the seller makes about the company's condition. Things like, yes, the financial statements are accurate. No, there are no hidden lawsuits. Yes, we own the key intellectual property.
So guarantees.
Pretty much. If those promises turn out to be false after the deal, the buyer usually has a legal claim against the seller for damages. It's another safety net for the investor putting in the cash.
And one last point he touched on, speed of execution. How does being fast help?
Sometimes just being able to get the deal done quickly and without fuss can be really attractive to a seller. If you can show you're serious, you've got your funding ready, you can do due diligence efficiently.
That might give you an edge over other potential buyers.
It can, yeah. Sellers often value certainty and speed. So if you can offer that, it might give you a bit more leverage when negotiating the price or other terms.
Okay, so wrapping up our look at cash for equity through Magnus Kjøller's lens, the core idea is simple. Cash for ownership.
Yep, capital for equity, fundamental.
But, as Kjøller makes clear, doing it well means really understanding those fundamentals, the term sheet, doing your due diligence properly, getting the shareholder agreement right, knowing the articles.
Absolutely. And especially if you're coming in as a minority shareholder, thinking carefully about negotiating those extra protections or special rights is crucial.
It's not just a simple swap when you dig into it. The success, the risk, it all hinges on those underlying documents and negotiations.
Precisely. Understanding these pieces is vital for anyone navigating the deal structuring world.
And look, if this has piqued your interest and you want to go deeper, not just on this, but other models Kjøller discusses, we really do recommend checking out his book.
Yeah, it's getting really good reviews, becoming quite popular for people wanting practical insights into deal making. You can find it easily on Amazon.
Definitely worth a look.
And for more general resources, tools, information on all things deal structuring, the website dealstructuring.com is a great place to explore.
So we'll leave you with this thought. Now that you've got this foundational grasp of cash for equity, what specific situations or maybe potential risks jump out at you? And how might some of those other deal structures or those fundamental elements like preferred shares or specific SHA clauses offer different ways to approach things or manage those risks?
Something to definitely mull over as you think about how these deals actually play out in the